Hi, everyone. Ted Wyman here with another edition of Jet Setting, where we talk about everything to do with the Winnipeg Jets. I'm joined today by Winnipeg Sun hockey writer Scott Billeck to talk about what the Jets have been doing lately, and that is doing a lot of winning. They've come off a successful road trip in which they won games and got a point in the one game that they didn't win, but didn't play all that great. And then since they've come home, a big win over Montreal in overtime and a very complete effort in a 4-0 win over the Chicago Blackhawks. Scott, this 7-3-1 record is one of the best starts ever for the Jets. Is it real or is it smoke and mirrors?
I think it's real. I think it obviously could have been, maybe 5-4-1, obviously, through or 5-4 and maybe even 5-5-1 through 11 games, given how they played in LA and Vegas on the road trip that you were on there. But no, like I think it's real because this team has been in almost all of these games, even when they were getting shelled by Vegas. It was still 0-0 at one point. It got to 1-1, and then they lose obviously in overtime there. But it was still, whether Connor Hellebuyck's been the guy or they've gotten a timely goal in overtime by Neil Pionk in Colorado, or they've just dominated the game like they did in St. Louis or against the Blackhawks there the other night there over the weekend. They've found ways to win, and it doesn't always seem like outside of Vegas, maybe the first period in LA, it doesn't feel like this team is just hanging on anymore, right? Like there's times where they're generating sustained offensive zone time. There's still the Jekyll and Hyde of this team though at times too, but at the same time, this team doesn't. I've said this before. They don't lose games and need the next day to kind of get over it. Like they figure out a way to reestablish themselves within the game that they're playing, and I think that's really helped them. Even against some of these teams, say, well, Montreal is not a great team or whatever. Well, Montreal gave them a good run in that game, but the Jets kind of just stuck with that game, found a way, and then found a way in overtime to win it. And it's stuff like that where this team, when they're doing everything right, it looks really good, and when they're not doing everything right, they're still in it. And I think that's kind of an important point early on in this year, that they're still finding ways to win. And Rick Bowness, all these guys have said, good teams find ways to win. I don't know if the Jets are still up there with the Vegases or the Boston Bruins or that just yet. But with a team that's really transitioned early on in this season throughout training camp into kind of a new system, they're handling it, they're weathering storms well, and obviously it shows in the record. It's that old Bill Parcells quote of you are what your record says you are. Well, right now the Jets will go into Tuesday's game against the Dallas Stars fighting for first place in the division.
Yeah, well, and how can you argue with that, right? I mean, this is a team that did not perform well last year. They went into last season with great expectations and performed poorly. This season, they come in with very few expectations and they're performing well. It's just funny how that works sometimes. But I'll say
Yeah.
there are two players in my mind who have been the absolute catalyst as to why the Winnipeg Jets are doing what they're doing right now. And those are Connor Hellebuyck, who's right up there having a Vezina-like
Yeah.
season without question, in the mix for that award. It's very early, but certainly in the mix for the first 10 games, if you were giving out an award for that. And Josh Morrissey, honestly, on defense, I think he's
Yeah.
playing his absolute best hockey. He's leading the team in scoring. He's doing everything. He's just a beautiful skater and a great puck controller. And I think we've always wanted to see that. I think as observers and the fans of the Winnipeg Jets, you want to see him control games the way that he is, and it just looks great on this team right now to have him playing that way, and then obviously good balance in the forward units as well. It seems to me, you're not getting a ton of goals from Kyle Connor. He's only got 2 so far. They haven't had Nikolai Ehlers.
Yeah.
The line, the Pierre-Luc Dubois line, when he is with Perfetti and Wheeler, it's been quite good. But the one where they've been getting a lot of their success, I think, is because of the play of the third and fourth lines. And we've seen guys like Saku Manalainen and Axel Jonsson-Fjällby, I think, play very well on both those lines. That Sam Gagner has contributed some. Adam Lowry's playing fantastic hockey, and he's got 2 shorthanded goals. David Gustafsson looks like a good fit there as the fourth line center. That seems different to me. to me, that bottom six
Oh,
has
yeah.
brought its level up, and that's a big part of why the Jets are better right now.
Yeah, I mean, gone are the days of, two old aging veterans that are basically placeholders, on that fourth line for the penalty kill, playing 3 or 4 minutes a night, and that's all they get. They rely on that fourth line, and even with the schedule being a little lighter this month in November, they're still playing that fourth line because it's effective. I mean, I think that's the thing, and it's interchangeable. They've had Manalainen, they've had Barron, they've obviously Barron's injured. But they moved Johnson Fialbi up onto the third line, and they find different ways to use the different strengths of that line, or tweak kind of. They needed a little more speed. They want a different kind of scoring touch, or whatever it is. Sam Gagner, as you said, probably one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best fourth line signings, depth signings, let's say, because he's played on the third line as well. That they've made in a long time, and it's not just a place where kind of old guys go to die anymore. And I think that's a big thing. There's a trust in that line that there wasn't that really there under Paul Maurice, at least most of the time. Like you said, Connor Hellebuyck, what a start. One of probably, I don't know if it's his best start to a season. I can't really call that off the top of my head, but I mean, he's playing like, he'll be in the Vezina conversation if he keeps this up. Actually, if he keeps this up, he'll probably win it, without any issue. But he's leading the league in shutouts, well, tied for the league lead in shutouts. His save percentage is right up there with the Jake Ottingers and the Ville Hussos and the guys that have started well, across the league right now. But he's winning games, and part of it too is like he's winning games, but he's not always having to win the game. You saw that against St. Louis and Chicago and even Montreal. I mean, he made some good saves in those games, but he wasn't like he was in Vegas or even like in that type of game where he had to really pull the team along in that game. Connor Hellebuyck's just doing it with some really good saves at opportune moments when they need them. But he in some of the games he hasn't been completely left out to dry and have to kind of reel the team in. I think the team's structure, and you talk Josh Morrissey, I mean, that's one of the reasons I think why, one of the big reasons why this team has been better this year is just, Josh Morrissey at both ends of the ice, obviously piling up the assists, got his first goal the other night against Chicago. But, like you said, I mean, I think with Josh Morrissey, you look at the last couple seasons. The first season, his dad gets diagnosed with cancer. The next one, his dad dies during the summer, before the season starts. That's the type of thing that it's going to weigh on anybody, never, let alone a professional hockey player who's got to go out and give his best every night. Not always easy to do. I think this has kind of been a maybe a fresh start for Josh Morrissey in more ways than one, not just with a new head coach or anything like that, but just without a lot of the noise that had been in his life in the previous years. And I think he's just freed himself from that. Time has passed. He's worked through some things, obviously, and it's just not weighing on him as much as it would have during those times. So, yeah, like I think this team is just in a better place. We weren't in the room for the last couple of years, and so it was hard to kind of get a gauge. You go into the room now and you just kind of watch, like you can fake that sort of thing in a room if everybody's there and everybody's kind of on point. But when you're just kind of watching around, it seems like everybody's really on the same page. And that's something that we kind of wondered about over the last couple of years, because the on ice results kind of maybe weren't there, especially last season. And you're like, okay, well, the culture's bad, or there's cliques and that sort of thing. This year it really doesn't seem like that's the case. It seems like Rick Bowness maybe stripping the captaincy from Blake Wheeler, all those things have kind of made it so everybody's included, right? Young player to the Dylan Sandbergs who've played 20 NHL games or whatever, to the Blake Wheelers who've played 1,000 plus. Everybody has an equal kind of voice in there. And I think that's really gone a long, long way to the start of their success, to Connor Hellebuyck playing well, to Josh Morrissey. And let's make no mistake, winning kind of feeds into that too. The more you win, the happier it goes. It's just the way it is. This team's going to eventually face a stretch where they probably lose a couple games. that's where the tests are. But I think they've also dealt with that kind of early on in the season, where they weren't, 7-3-1. And they dealt with that too. They lost in a game in Dallas. That was a tough game after opening their season with kind of I don't know, I guess an emphatic win over the New York Rangers. So they've dealt with the adversity well. They've dealt with Nikolai Ehlers being out of the lineup for most of the season already at this point. It's those signs that you kind of watch to see kind of how tight knit maybe a team is, and the Jets seem to be kind of all pulling in the same direction, which is what I think a lot of people wanted to see, especially coming out of last season.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to give a lot of the credit to Rick Bowness for that. Even though he hasn't even been around the team that much, he certainly assembled a staff that's working well with this group. It was very interesting on the last road trip to be there with Scott Arniel and Brad Lauer and Marty Johnson, and we had a chance to talk to all of them. And I just got a really good sense that they've got a good group of guys here that are very much teachers, that are very much interested in delivering, Rick Bowness's message, and that is to get this team to learn to play a little bit differently, to play with a different kind of structure, and to be a better hockey team. Now that don't want to just completely throw Paul Maurice under the bus, but even he knew that he had lost the ability to get through to the players, and that's why he decided to step down. And Dave Lowry didn't have much of a chance with coming into the situation that he was in. And then so it was time for a completely clean slate. The Jets didn't exactly get the coach they wanted. There were some others that they were interested in, but Rick Bowness brings a ton of experience. He's a guy with a lot of enthusiasm. He's a guy that gets along really well with people, and the players obviously like. And then he brought in guys like Scott Arniel who are similar in that way. Yeah. And they're smart guys, and they're very good at communicating with us as media people. So I assume they're very good at communicating with these players as well. And I think that makes a big difference. And you can see it you can hear it in the voices. You can see it in the play of the players that they're responding to what's going on here. And that's a very good sign. And I think Mark Scheifele kind of summed it up. He sums it up every chance he gets to say that he feels like they are getting appropriate coaching this year, and they probably weren't in some previous times.
Well, and that's it, right? I mean, sometimes the old, was it Rolling Stones song, where it's not, you don't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need. And I think that's kind of what, you can look at Rick Bowness, right? Everybody here was clamoring for Barry Trotz when that whole process was going on. And there would be nobody that thought Rick Bowness was going to be the head coach of this team. He wasn't on anybody's short list, kind of going into that whole thing. And now, Rick Bowness is the guy that's kind of brought the troops together and assembled, as you said, the Scott Arniel, because I was on that first road trip of the year, and Scott Arniel was in the same spot, coaching the team every day. But here's a guy who's a former player that still, he understands what these, what the young players want, what the old players want. I think having Brad Lauer there, who coached the Edmonton Oil Kings in the WHL last season, obviously knows what a younger player kind of needs, just how to communicate with those guys. And that's the big word, right? Communication. You referenced Mark Scheifele. I've talked to Brendan Dillon, Nate Schmidt, kind of almost everybody. You go to that room, it's like, yeah, like that, these coaches, they listen to us, we have a voice, and they talk through kind of what's wrong. They talked about this after that last road trip, because they were happy that they had 5 of 6 points. They weren't really happy about how they got them. But it was, when they got back, Rick Bowness was kind of asking, okay, so what went wrong? Why did it go wrong? Why did we revert to, some of maybe the old ways and that sort of thing? So it was an open discussion where players could kind of, point to like this, and this, and say, this is why. And so you could kind of have those teaching moments. It sounds all kind of really primitive stuff, right? Sometimes you kind of almost have to catch yourself and like, it's just like, is this, like, this is hockey, people should know this. But I think it's been a tough go for some of these players, where it's like, the idea of that even a forward should cover off a defenseman that's going off the ice. I mean, that seems so, so fundamental when it comes to hockey. But I think a lot of this has been, kind of just getting these players back to confidence, to the ideas of that maybe weren't there for the last couple of years and haven't been. And so yeah, I think Rick Bowness has been a huge catalyst for this, probably the biggest one for sure. And it's just the biggest problem that a new head coach is always going to have coming into this team was kind of getting everybody in unison, getting that unity back, getting that team back in the word team. I think Rick Bowness, even though he hasn't always been around, I think he's done that, and I think that started from day one. Well, it started from the summer where he was polling all the players, just phoning them, cold calling, whatever it was, to kind of just talk to them, get a sense of it, and from there he built what he felt that this team could kind of work through it and that sort of thing, and it's worked well so far. We're 11 games into the year. We're not at game 82 yet. We don't know where this story ends right now. But in the early goings, even in not playing their best hockey at times, this Jets team has found a way to win, and you can't really argue with the results right now.
No, you absolutely can't, Scott. It's early on in the season. It's a very good start. We shall see just how the Jets finish up in the Central Division. Right now, they are right near the top, and I'm sure there are a lot of hockey fans in Winnipeg who are enjoying that. So that's enough for Jet Setting for today. For Scott Billeck, I'm Ted Wyman. We'll see you next time.